Good morning, everyone. Today, we are diving into four critical economic topics to help us navigate the challenges and opportunities ahead. In a rapidly changing global economy, understanding these dynamics is key to making informed strategic decisions. We'll start by analyzing the business cycle to time our strategies, then explore how tariffs impact export markets, and the need for diversification. Next, we use behavioral economics to understand why people choose unhealthy food. And finally, we'll examine how generative AI can both increase and decrease labor market inequality depending on our actions. Let's get started with topic one. Topic one, macroeconomy and understanding business cycle. The three macroeconomic measures we'll be talking about is gross domestic product, GDP, inflation rate, and unemployment. GDP is defined as the total monetary value of all final goods and services produced within a country's border over a specific period of time, usually annually or quarterly. The inflation rate is defined as percentage change in the general price level of goods and services in an economy over a specific period of time, usually monthly or annually. Unemployment is defined as a percentage of labor force that is without jobs but actively seeking work and available to work during a specific period of time. Looking at the business cycle, you can see that during a recession, GDP will usually decrease, unemployment rate increases, and inflation decreases. During expansion of the business cycle, we can see that usually GDP increases, unemployment decrease, and inflation increase as well. For our organization, understanding the business cycle help us to plan strategically. In a recession, we might be able to cut costs or diversify products to stay resilient. And during expansion, we can invest in growth, new markets, or innovation. Misjudging a cycle could lead to missed opportunities or financial strains, so leaders need to understand these insights to make informed decisions. Moving on to topic 2, tariffs and trade wars. With President Trump's recent election, tariffs are back in the spotlight, and we need to understand their impact on our organization. First, let's look at the demand and supply diagram showing the US market for a Singaporean export. The downward sloping labeled D is US demand, and the upward sloping line SD is US domestic supply. Under free trade, Singapore's supply curve can be represented with SFT. Looking at the diagram, Singapore supplies the good at the world price PW, where the equilibrium with the demand curve is at E1. At this low price, US demands are high and can be represented as QD, but domestic supply is low since there is lesser supplier willing to supply at lower price. Thus, US domestic supply can be represented as QS. With that being said, at PW, there is high demand than supply in the US, resulting in US to import from other countries such as Singapore, the difference between demand and supply, which is QD minus QS, as seen in the diagram. QD minus QS is the amount imported by US from Singapore. Now, when the US imposes a tariff on our exports, it acts as like a tax, shifting the supply curve up to S tariff, rising the price of products to PT. The new equilibrium is at E2. At this higher price, US demands falls to QD1, and domestic supply rises to QS1. So US imports from Singapore drops from QD minus QS to QD1 minus QS1, which shows that there is lesser imports from Singapore. The green area in the graph shows tariff revenue that the US government collects, while the red area highlights deadweight loss, which is also known as the inefficiency from reduced trades. The tariffs hit Singaporean firms hard, as we will sell lesser to the US as their imports drops, directly cutting our revenue. Global trade efficiency will also drop, which is shown as the deadweight loss. This shows the economic value lost from reduced trade, and the US consumer pays more. And if Singapore retaliates, we could see as a trade war, further sinking global trade. This disruption makes it harder for us to compete in the US market. For our organization, this means lower export sales to the US market, squeezing our profits. and we need to act either by diversifying our trades into other markets like Europe or Asia, or by absorbing some of the tariff costs to stay competitive. Through that, will hit our margin and cause us to have lesser revenue. Understanding this impacts us, help us make smarter strategic decisions to stay resilient. Moving on, we'll explore how behavioral economics can help us understand consumer choices better. Next, we'll talk about behavioral economics. Behavioral economics assume people aren't fully rational, often using mental shortcuts and being swayed by bias, leading to suboptimal decisions being made. For example, when choosing a snack, someone might pick chips over a salad due to present bias and status quo bias. Present bias means they overvalue instant gratifications, like choosing chips, which are quick and tasty, giving immediate satisfaction, while salads might benefit health in the long term. Status quo bias means they stick to familiar habits, such as if they are used to grabbing chips now, they'll keep doing so even though they know that salads are healthier. Accessibility and cost also play a role, as chips are cheaper and more available in places like vending machine, especially for the poor, as we've seen in our research. This differs from the traditional economics, which assumes people are rational decision makers, systematically weighing costs and benefits to maximize their long-term well-being. In this view, if someone knows salads are healthier, they logically choose them, focusing on long-term health benefits over the short-term cost of effort of preparation. But traditional economics ignore biases like present bias or status quo bias, which behavioral economics shows are key to understanding real human behavior and why people often make less rational choices like picking unhealthy snacks like potato chips over salads. Finally, let's tackle topic 4, AI and labor market inequality. We use these diagrams to explore how generative AI impacts the labor market, both increasing and decreasing inequality. For scenario 1, generative AI increases inequality. The first diagram shows how generative AI can increase inequality in the labor market for creative workers like graphic designers. Initially, demand is at D1 with wages at W1 and employment at Q1. When generative AI like DAO-E automates routine design tasks, demand falls to D2, wages drop to W2 and employment falls to Q2, meaning lower pay and fewer jobs for mid-skill creatives. Meanwhile, high-skill workers like AI developers often see increased demand and higher wages. This widens the income gap between mid-skill and high-skill workers, increasing labor market inequality, as those unable to adapt will lose out. For this scenario, there is an assumption that AI primarily automates mid-skill creative tasks and that there is a constant labor supply. For scenario 2, generative AI decreases inequality. The second diagram shows how generative AI can decrease inequality in the demand for creative workers like writers. D1 with wages at W1 and employment at Q1. When writers use generative AI like ChatGPT to boost productivity, demand rises to D2, wages increases to W2, and employment goes to Q2, meaning higher pay and more jobs for those who can adapt to the usage of AI. If high-skilled workers like AI specialists see stable wage growth due to market saturation, the income gap narrows, decreasing inequality. This shows how AI can benefit a broader group, reducing disparities. For this scenario, it is assumed that many workers can adapt to AI, and high-skilled wages grow slow with a constant labor supply. Looking ahead, generative AI might continue automating mid-skill jobs across industries like customer service, further increasing inequality by widening the income gap. Alternatively, if AI tools become more accessible, low and mid-skill workers could use them to enhance productivity, increasing their demand and decreasing inequality. The future likely depends on access to training and how widely AI benefits are shared across the workforce. Let's wrap up with our key takeaways. First, business cycle informs strategic timing to invest or cut costs during the expansion or recession phase of the business cycle. Second, tariffs, as we saw in the US and Singapore market, challenge export markets, pushing us to diversify into new regions. Third, behavioral economics shows how bias like present bias drives irrational choices for instant gratification, which results in suboptimal decisions being made. Finally, generative AI's impact on inequality varies depending on our actions. It can widen income by automating mid-skill jobs or narrow it by empowering workers who adapt, depending on how we respond. To stay ahead, let's lead with foresight and act strategically, using these insights to navigate economic challenges and shape a more equitable future. Thank you for your time.